Well, even though my title of my sermon series kind of irritates David a little bit, go along to get along, it's really about conflict. It's what the real topic is. Conflict between ourselves and the world, conflict between our church and the world. So, but today's sermon, I think you're going to like. This world is not my home. Scripture's 1 John 2:15 through 17. Father told of taking his 5-year-old to Disneyland. And it was the little boy, all the little boy could talk about for weeks and weeks, and now they finally were there, and the little boy loved the idea he'd get to see Goofy and Mickey and Minnie and the gang. He was hyped up. Ooh. They parked the car and could see the castle and the rides in the distance, and they made their way to the ticket sales and entered through the gates into a relatively small area where families could have their pictures taken with all the Disney characters. And then they were going into the main park, but the little boy didn't understand. He thought that was the park where they met the characters. And then his dad tried to herd him into the park, and the boy threw an absolute fit. The boy thought that here they had just got to the wonderful world of Disney and his dad was going to take him home. He fought it. But as his dad brought him around the corner, there was the park with all the rides, and the boy's cries became shrieks of joy. Think about it. The boy had to leave what he thought was good to get to what his dad knew was better. One of my favorite gospel songs is this one. You could sing the chorus with me if you'd like. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Wow. Can't you just see that angels beckoning you? Come on, come on. Come on, Wiley. Come on, come on. The song declares that this world is good, but heaven's better. Much better. Our text today takes it even one step further. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 tells us, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them." And that's repeated elsewhere in Scripture. James 4:4 says, "You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity with God, against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God." And Mark 8:36 says, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul?" There's a couple of reasons why I think God stresses this so hard. The first is the things of this world are deceptive. The world offers things that are just good, but they're not from God. These good things can often become substitutes for that which is better. Notice what it says in 1 John 2:16. "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world." Years ago, I heard a preacher preach on this very passage, and he tied 1 John 2 to a story out of the Old Testament, the story of Adam and Eve. I know you've heard it. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth, and he created all the animals, birds, fish of the sea, and he created in his image, male and female. He created them, and he placed them in a beautiful garden. And I know the Bible doesn't say, but I can just picture Adam and Eve treating the animals there as their personal pets. I can imagine them scratching the ears of a lion, playing tag with the monkeys, jumping around with the kangaroos. And there are many Bible scholars who think that there were occasions where God would come and walk and talk with Adam and Eve in the cool of the evenings. Well, Scripture says that. And God told Adam in Genesis 2:16 and 17, "And the Lord commanded the man, 'You are free to eat from any tree of the garden, but you must not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die.'" They had everything they could possibly want, just not that tree. And then one day, Satan began whispering in Eve's ear, "Did God really say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And with that, Satan planted a seed, a little seed of doubt in Eve's mind. "You shall not surely die," he told her. No. Let's look at Genesis 3:5. "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Well, I've always taught they already knew good, didn't they? They knew ultimate good, so all that was left to learn was what? Evil. See, once Satan got Eve to doubt God, to take her eyes off God, the rest was easy. The rest was easy. He got her thinking, maybe you're right. Maybe God has deceived me. Maybe he's the bad guy here. Maybe God has denied what I really want and doesn't have what I really want. And then she began to look at that tree with new eyes. Before we get to the story, I want you to notice what it says in Genesis 2:9. It says, "The Lord made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground that were pleasing." Wait a minute. I don't have that one here. Sorry. "Pleasing to the eye and the good and for food." Did you see that? All these kinds of trees that were pleasing to the eye were good for food. Well, about all he planted there was fruit trees, right? Wow, peaches and mangoes and oranges and pears and apples. Wow. It didn't say that they were forbidden to eat of the tree of life. Every tree was very good. The only one that they were forbidden to eat from was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They were pleasing to the eye. They were pleasing to look at. They were good for food, nourishing. All kinds of trees. But then in Genesis 3:6 we read, "When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some of it and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it." Again, Genesis 3:6. So there were all kinds of trees in this garden that were good for food. There were all kinds of trees that were pleasing to the eye. But the fruit was different. It wasn't like the other kinds of fruit, because that was the fruit that God had denied her. And so she desired it. She wanted it so badly, she could almost taste it. Wow. I'm sure she'd seen it, but she probably never looked at it with those eyes before. Now she could almost taste that fruit. Ooh. And that's what our text today is in 1 John chapter 2 is talking about. This tree appealed to her desire of the flesh. Eve believed that this tree was good for food. And even though every other tree in the garden was good for food, it also appealed to her desire of the eyes. Genesis says the tree appealed to Eve because it was pleasing to the eye. But Genesis doesn't tell us, but Genesis tells us that all the other trees were pleasing to the eye too. Now, there's kind of an overlap with these two desires because when people see what they want, they sense a desire in the flesh for what they've seen, and when that happens, they'll do what they have to do to get what they want. And when it's something they shouldn't have, their desire for those things can trap them in sin. It's just that simple. I remember reading a story of a 6-year-old boy in Wisconsin who tried playing one of those crane operator games with the toy prizes inside, where you move the little paddles or the joysticks. I've tried it before, and I'm sure you've probably put a coin or two in one of them. And I couldn't get a prize, so I just didn't try anymore. But this little boy was so entranced, the plush toys inside were pleasing to his eyes. And although he probably had better toys at home, he felt the desire of the flesh to have one of them for his own, very own. And several times he tried to work the crane but couldn't get anything. He wanted the toy, but the stupid machine wouldn't cooperate. Well, don't you just hate it? You get that thing and you get it right up to the lip of the thing and then it drops right in there. You're so close. What do you think he did? That's right. He climbed inside the machine. And by the time the firefighters arrived and managed to get him almost completely inside with just the right foot hanging out, he was trapped. But the firemen finally got the game unlocked and he was released unharmed. For a short period of time, the desires of his eyes and his flesh trapped him. Sort of like the way of reaching in the cookie jar to get as many cookies as you can, right? The opening is fairly small, but you can get your hand in, but then you got them, but you can't get your hand out. You're trapped. There's an old saying, all that glitters is not gold. It encapsulates what our text tells us today. Lots of stuff glitters like gold, and lots of stuff catches our eye and our imagination. And we just have to have that item. But it's not what it appears. When people fix their eyes on the things of the world, they end up fixing their eyes on the thing that will trap them in sin. Trap could be pornography, or drugs, or alcohol, or gambling. Or it could be the approval of their friends that makes them engage in activities they shouldn't. Or it could be the possessions they can't afford. They just have to have them. And so they'll do what they have to do to get what they shouldn't have or can't justify. My point is this. Your desires, my desires, can hurt us. Just like they hurt Adam and Eve. The only way to combat this evil is to get our eyes off the things of this world and focus on God and His will for our lives. There you have it. There's the focus. But there's a third thing mentioned in 1 John that I found interesting. It's called the pride of life. That was the real target of Satan's temptation of Eve. He told her in Genesis 3:5, "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing what is good and evil." And then the next verse 3:6a. "And when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it." The desire to make one wise was really where she really bought into Satan's lie. Well, that was really the hook. That's what got her. Because she wanted to be like God. The pride of life is when we want to be in charge. We want to be right. We want to express our opinions. And we want our way. That's why there's so much conflict in our world. Everybody wants their way. funny, this morning we were looking at the back part of our new shed this morning, David and Howard and I. And we were talking about different things that we might like to do to it. And all three of us had different ideas about some little simple things, you know. Wouldn't it be bad if one of us just had to have our way? It was important that we do it this way. It's got to be I see the vision. See, simple little things can even tear us apart, can't they? If we let it. We're not going to do that. But I mean, just pointing out, I just saw simple little things that Satan uses to just rip us apart. That's why there's so much conflict in our world. Everybody wants their way. You can see it in politics. You can see it in churches. You can see it in homes. People fighting over stuff because they want things their way. They want to be God. That's what we're really saying. I want to be in charge. I want to be God. I want to dictate how this goes. The only way to combat that kind of evil in our lives is to fix our eyes on Jesus. Every week, when I work on my sermons, I dedicate an entire page of my word processor to scriptures. I think that might be useful for the sermon. And this Sunday, I ran across a passage that truly summed up everything I wanted to focus on. It's in Colossians 3, 1 through 4. Since then, you've been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. That's what we need to be looking at. That's what we want to fix our eyes on. When we start imagining things, imagine that. Now, at the beginning of the sermon, I noted that I believe that at least a couple of reasons God focuses on telling us not to love the world. And the first was the world can deceive us and trap us into accepting substitutes for what God really wants to give us. But the second reason I believe God stresses this so strongly is because we kind of like this world. We're used to it. It's comfortable, right? I mean, I like this kind of world. I've got a great church to preach to, a wonderful group of family and friends, and I've got a nice house, a nice car. My health's pretty good. I got no complaints. So why shouldn't I like this world? See, that's not an uncommon thought. One preacher observed that there's all these songs about heaven. When we all get to heaven, I'll fly away when the roll is called up yonder and the sweet by and by, and the list goes on and on. But he said, you know, that when it's all said and done, when people are on death's bed, they tend not to be so homesick for heaven. They want to have just one more minute, one more hour, one more day. They literally grasp at life with greedy hands to have just a little longer time on earth. And that's what happened back in the Old Testament. One of the godliest kings in Israel was a man named King Hezekiah. 2 Kings 20 verses 1-3 tells us, in those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. 1-3. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, went to him and said, this is what the Lord says, put your house in order, because you're going to die, you will not recover. Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. Remember, Lord, how I've walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion, and have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Why did he weep bitterly? He didn't want to die. He was a godly man. A lot of people don't want to die. They don't want to leave this world behind. I mean, it's all they've ever known. It's easy to fall in love with the world. But God says, don't do that. It's a trap. This world is not your home. We're just passing through. As 1 John 2:17 tells us, the world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. I wonder if we're alive on the last day when the trump sounds and Jesus comes out of heaven and we see the dead rising first. In the back of your mind, are you going to think, oh, Lord, is this really the time? Don't you want to leave me here a little bit longer? I hope we don't see that. Why on earth would we want to stay here? This is just a place where we get our pictures taken. The real park is on the other side of the gate. And that's where our Father has something better waiting for us just inside the gate. As I was preparing the sermon and taking a look at the various songs we know that talk about heaven, I stumbled across a song that sums up everything I believe the Bible is trying to tell us about this. It's called the Hymn of Heaven by Paul Wickham. I'll read it to you this morning. How I long to breathe the air of heaven, where pain is gone and mercy fills the streets. To look upon the one who bled to save me, to walk with him for all eternity. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more. Standing face to face with he who died and rose again, holy, holy is the Lord. And every prayer we prayed in desperation, the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear, in the end we'll see that it was worth it when he returns to wipe away our tears. Oh, there will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more. Standing face to face with he who died and rose again, holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of faith. With one voice 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. So let it be today we shout the hymn of heaven. With angels and the saints we raise a mighty roar. Glory to our God who gave us life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. See, that song sums up what our view of life and death in this world versus the next. Nat King Cole, one of my favorite singers, when he was dying from cancer, observed that he'd learned that the so-called big things became the small things. And the so-called small things were really the most important things. Isn't that terrible to gain some wisdom right before you die? I guess it's a good thing to gain it at all, but man, think of all the time wasted. And what is the most important thing? Rick Warren noted that it is knowing that this life is not all there is. Life on earth is just a dress rehearsal before the real production. You will spend far more time on the other side of death in eternity than you will here. Earth is a staging area, the preschool, the tryout. Your life is eternity. This life is preparation for the next. At most, you will live 100 years on earth, but you will spend it forever in eternity. Thomas Brown said that this life is but a small parenthesis in eternity. You were made to last forever. Are you holding on tightly to this life we live? Does death make you afraid? My wife Marion always said that she was in a win-win situation. If she died, she went to be with the Lord. But if she lived, she got to spend a little bit more time with her family. Her attitude about this gives me encouragement that I need to have the same attitude every day of my life. I hope and pray that each one of you is looking for more than just what you have to do tomorrow. God's heaven is far more attractive than this existence we call life. If my words this morning has stirred your soul, please come forward this morning as we stand and sing Song of Invitation.